All right, this is a little review, a short review on relative clauses or adjective clauses we studied last synchronous session. Okay, let's start. So what are relative clauses? We said that this is pretty much a phrase or a clause, right? That's why it's called clauses, that gives you or adds extra information or information in general to a sentence. They describe nouns and pronouns too. That's something to keep in mind. Let me move myself here. Okay. And they begin with one of these words. We classify these words into relative pronouns and relative adverbs. Relative pronouns we have that, that, which, whom, who, whose, and relative adverbs where, when, why, because. They talk about places, time, and reason, right? And if you remember, adverbs have that function. That's why we call them relative adverbs. And just for you to remember, who, it's used for people. Like the example we have here, the woman who works in the bank is my neighbor. Whom is just a more, let's say, formal way to describe people, and we also use it for the object, like this. My cousin, one of whom is a doctor, lived in England. This is for possession. The man whose car was stolen went to the police station. That describes things. I'm selling the computer that I bought in the US, and the last one, which it also used to describe things, right? I'm selling this computer which has 250 gigabyte hard drive for $500. Now remember that can also be used for people, but there are very specific cases in which we can use them, right? We're going to check that in a couple of minutes. And the relative adverbs, because they talk about time, right? They talk about place and they talk about reason, we consider them adverbs, right? Just like the examples we have there. Now, here we have some examples of sentences with the relative clauses, and they are very much used when you are talking about the same thing, but we just write simple sentences. So in order for us to avoid doing that, this is something we can do, right? Just connect them with this. For example, yesterday I met a man who works in the circus. So we are talking about the same person. You're talking about a man. I met who? A man. In this case, that's the object, right? So then we're gonna try connecting them. I bought a cell phone. It has internet access. Again, you are talking about the same thing. You're talking about the phone. You're talking about it later. And see, there's the restaurant. I ate at that restaurant last night. So you're talking about the restaurant, and you mentioned the restaurant again. So whenever you have two sentences like this, talking about the same thing, it's a great opportunity for us to use relative clauses. So if we want to combine them, we will probably have something like this. Sentences, let me move myself again, there we go. With relative clauses. Yesterday, I met a man who works in the circus. So if you check, we are replacing he for men, right? Remember, relative clauses always next to the noun they describe. I bought a cell phone that has internet access. Same case. We were talking about cell phones here with it, right? So we just use that to replace it. And letter C. There's a restaurant where I ate at that restaurant. I ate at that restaurant last night. Oh, where I ate last night, right? We actually have to. Let me do something here. There we go. So since we already have here this where, it's replacing this restaurant. So our job, again, just like we did in the previous one, is I ate at last night, right? So we don't need to do this anymore. That's something to be very, very careful about. Now, we also mentioned that we have defining and non-defining relative clauses. What are these? Very easy, very simple. Non-defining relative clauses add extra information to the sentence, meaning when you have this info, you can remove it and the meaning is not affected. And defining relative clauses, on the other hand, they give you very important, vital, essential information to the sentence. choice example. Pupusas, which are a Salvadorian traditional dish, are delicious. This one is considered non-defining because you and I know that this dish is Salvadorian and it's very traditional. We don't need this information, so we can actually remove it. Same case if I have this one. I like the girl who lives next door. Now, let's analyze the sentences for a couple of minutes, right? So if I have this, pupusas, which are Salvadorian traditional dish, are delicious. We completed the idea. So if we come here and we remove, let me do this, there we go. If we remove this, the meaning is still the same. Pupusas are delicious. Our intention is to say they are very tasty, right? But if we have this one, it's information. Just like the example we had in class. Maybe if it is a person from a different country, right? You can express this and it will change into a defining relative. On the other hand, check letter B. I like the girl. If you remove this, there is something missing in the idea, right? You need to know who this girl is. Because you say, I like girl, and you have like 50 girls. Which one are you talking about? So in this case, this relative clause becomes extremely important to complete the meaning. It's essential for you to add it. So then we have, I like the girl, will be this one. My brother who lives in California is an engineer. If you remove who lives in California, what happens? Nothing happens, right? The meaning is the same. Knowing that your brother is from California is not important, right? Of course, depending a lot on the context and situation in which you're expressing this idea, right? Now, very important. Whenever you have non-defining, right? When the information is extra, you need to write them between commas, right? Don't forget about that part. And don't forget about using that is not permitted in non-defined relative clauses. So if you see a clause with commas, like who lives in California, remember, we never use that. Between commas, never that. I think that is a good way to remember. Now, if we're removing this sentence, who failed English class 3 times, the sentence is incomplete, right? So we also need this, that's the student. I will need this relative clause. So be very, very careful about it. So in this one, if you remove who lives in California, not a problem, meaning is clear, but here meaning is not that clear. So we kind of have to be careful about this, right?